It's been a heavy couple of weeks, from taking one of horror's most beloved classics and explaining why it's not very good, and then arguing for the defense of one of 2018's least liked horror films. It's been a controversial time. So let's have a bit of fun. This week we're going to the
one place that hasn't been corrupted by capitalism. Space!
Spoilers ahead for Apollo 18. If you haven't seen the movie, go and watch it. This is your final warning. Found footage as a subgenre is fascinating. From its inception in the 80s, to its firm establishment in US cinema in the 90s, to its sudden explosion in popularity in the 2010s. Do we have a better word for it than 2010s? No, 2010s it is. One of the key things that separates found footage from other forms of cinema is that there has to be an in-universe or diegetic reason for the existence of the camera through which we see the plot. The easiest way to do this is through the mockumentary, which is why so many found footage horror movies follow that exact format, whether supposed professional documentary crew or some knobhead with a camera. But we don't often get the info dump movies. The films are arranged by some unknown editor from recovered footage, which is weird because the first big heavy hitter of the subgenre was exactly that. Apollo 18 fits the same criteria. We don't know who specifically has taken the supposedly real footage and presented it to us, but the idea is that this recovered lost footage of a secret mission to the moon having been sent to a whistleblower website that was in fact the movie's own webpage. A quick summary of the plot of this movie. 3 astronauts, Commander Nathan, Captain Ben, no relation, and Lieutenant Colonel John are headed to the moon. The manned missions the US was running to space ended with budgetary restrictions, resulting in the Apollo missions 18, 19, and 20 being cancelled. But our intrepid boys are picked up by NASA and told that they are flying out on a secret mission to the moon to help install some spy tech that will help the US keep an eye on those pesky Russians. They set off with John remaining in the vessel Freedom as it stays in orbit, and Nate and Ben on the Liberty as it heads to the moon's surface to install the trackers. After the trackers are installed, they take off on the lander again, they meet up with John, and they fly straight home. Just kidding, there's monsters. Moon monsters. Moonsters. On landing, Nathan and Ben install the devices which pump out a garbled signal that interferes with their own comms. They then find that those pesky Russians have run their own secret mission to the moon, as a cosmonaut has been there and has not had the best experience. As they try to head home, the samples they have been collecting of moon rocks turn out to be a bit monstrous crab aliens. Nathan gets scratched and infected with an alien disease that causes some kind of psychosis or delusional state, while Ben flees the destroyed US craft to try and get the old Russian lander up and moving again. Once inside, he speaks with the Department of Defense over the radio, and they tell him that he's stranded. Meanwhile, John in the Freedom has not really been doing much of anything, save trying to get to the bottom of the mysterious interference. He manages to reach Ben, however, and John defies the DoD's orders to attempt to rendezvous with Ben to save him. On the way to the Freedom, however, Ben gets attacked and loses control of the Russian lander, sending it plowing into the Freedom and killing both John and Ben in the process. It's not what I'd call a happy movie. Apollo 18 came out in 2018, and although it made a tidy profit, it was hit with some pretty brutal reviews and it kind of disappeared. I have, to this day, had one person mention this movie to me in conversation. Of course, I only speak to one other person, and he's pretty obsessed with found footage movies. Not now. Why was he shorter? On the surface, Apollo 18 seems like a pretty straightforward monster movie. Man enters space, in which he cannot survive without his own technical invention, in this case, actual space, and then comes up against creatures native to that space. But there's much more to the narrative than just the surface level, classic man versus space crab story. At its core, Apollo 18 is a deeply pessimistic movie, and particularly critical of patriotism, or to reduce it to its simplest level, living for an ideology based on the prosperity of a geographical place. At the beginning of the movie, we're introduced to the astronauts who will be undertaking this mission. By the basic understanding we have as an audience, we know that Astronauts are people who have trained for a very long time to get to that position, and we see that the opportunity to go into space is a very big deal for these guys. All three astronauts represent a different attitude to the military chain of command during the height of the Cold War. Nathan's first lines in the film tell us that he comes from a long line of military pilots, and sometimes the old home life suffers when work takes priority.
I come from a family of military pilots. Duty can sometimes outbalance a private life. You make choices, keep moving forward.
Before we hear from Nathan, John tells us it was in fact Nathan who confirmed that they would be up for the mission, responding to a question about the mission being top secret and whether that would be a problem for them.
Asked, are you okay with that? And it was like, are you kidding me?
But we never hear Nathan mention his family, apart from a quick shot of a woman sitting on his lap at the barbecue at the beginning, his divorced ex-wife, and a throwaway comment about getting jalapeno on his genitals. No, I'm not going to contextualize that for you, you're going to have to watch the movie. Nathan is going to the moon because he has a dutiful obligation to the motives of his country. Now, John doesn't give us much in the way of his motivation. We sadly get very little of John in the final cut, though in the deleted scenes we do see a lot more of the intense psychological strain he goes under just being so close to the moon and not being able to land on it and being alone the whole time. He does, however, tell us that these missions are results-oriented and they can't afford to fail. And throughout, he keeps an eye over the other two and gives them advice and kind of plays Overwatch. John is going to the moon because he feels a responsibility to do what he can to protect his country and the people he cares about. Ben, who is the closest to a primary protagonist the film has, is much more vocal about his regrets in undertaking the mission.
Would have been nice to tell my wife. Laura's been by my side the whole time, and she thinks I'm off doing a training exercise with the Japanese Space Agency. Ryan, my boy, would have been nice to tell him his old man's going to the moon. I would have loved to have brought him a souvenir, maybe a moon rock. I don't know, maybe one day.
His wife has been very supportive of him, and he has to lie to her about where he's going, and his son, well, he just wants to make his son proud. Not to mention his first day on the ground is Christmas Day. Ben is going to the moon because although he can't tell them, he wants to make his family proud. The stated goal as they understand it is that they will be installing devices to help track Russian missiles, specifically placing this mission as an act by the US government to better monitor their enemies. Cold War crash course. Aside from the many proxy wars taking place across the planet, the notion of mutually assured destruction, or MAD, kept the US and the Soviet Union from directly engaging with all of their biggest sticks. Basically, if one group fired nukes on the other, the victim would also fire nukes because that way, all the civilians will be dead instead of just half of them. You know how the saying goes, an eye for an eye makes the whole world better and everyone just calms the down. The US government of Apollo 18 is lying to the public about cancelling the mission, the unmanned craft getting launched with 3 guys in it, and by extension operating a paternalistic approach to governance. The public doesn't know because A, the Russians might find out, and B, because the public doesn't need to know the measures being taken to keep them safe. Regardless of their personal motivations, all 3 of the astronauts are willingly participating in this mission, and as such are signalling their endorsement for this paternalistic way of doing things. Regardless of why they are there to do as their country says. And this film hates them for it. All 3 get punished for their complicity in this system. They are sent to die in an experiment on the moon, and whether or not each character comes to fully understand the way in which they've been betrayed, they most certainly have been. Nathan is a military pilot, and his family's legacy is that of military piloting? His family have fought and likely died for the country, and we can assume in conflicts like the Second World War. Those ideals of the American way of life that supposedly set them apart from the Soviet Union, those values for which the Nathans of the world throw themselves on the pyre are not the motivations of the country's government. They are not on the moon to help them track their enemies, the Soviets. And at the end, Ben is patched through to the DoD by the Russians. We can assume from this that they are working together, or at least not so fated nemesis as the world would believe. Nathan went to space for the ideals of his country, but his country does not represent those ideals. John went to the moon because he viewed it as his responsibility. He missed out on the chance to walk on the lunar surface, the opportunity of a lifetime, but he did it because These missions are results focused, and we can't afford to fail. But this mission isn't about protecting people. It's the exact opposite. It's about exposing people many in American society, especially in the 60s, would hail as heroes, to an unknown threat to see what would happen. There is no protection, simply sacrifice for data. John dies because he defies the orders to leave Ben behind, and he doesn't really come to understand the scope by which his beliefs have been betrayed. John went to space to protect those he cares about, but his country expects him to leave his injured and dying comrades behind. And Ben. Ben goes to the moon because his son wants to travel through space with him. He wants to be a symbol of pride to his family, those very ideals that saw Neil Armstrong beamed into households across America. He wanted to make them proud of him, and in some way pay them back for the support they've given him. He wants to be held up as a hero because being a hero means something. The DoD offer Ben, as they tell him they won't save him and he will die alone on the moon the day after Christmas, that they will tell the country he died a hero. He is offered the hero's death, but it's a lie. The time, the place, the means, the motive. At the end of the day, a heroic death is as quick and easy as lying. He rejects this and fights to come home, but he doesn't make it. He can't come home because he's entered into a system willingly. He's trapped there. Ben went to space to make people proud, but the recognition he seeks is proven worthless. Nathan, John, and Ben all get their reward, a heroic-sounding lie. To die for your country doesn't mean to die fighting for its values or protecting its people. It simply means to have your life used up in service of its goals, with the legacy of that sacrifice to be bent and repurposed as it requires. We see this in the reflected fate of the cosmonaut. The Soviet Union supposedly never got a manned mission to the moon, and yet here he was. Another secret launch, more footprints in the dust, a lander gone dark, a flag destroyed and laid on the floor. We even see one of the American astronauts staring into the cosmonaut's helmet, and we see that they're the same. It doesn't matter what the ideology, the supposed national ideology. This movie places the nationalistic Cold War ideologies of Americans and Soviets on the same level, and we know both sides are at least in communication with each other. Choose patriotism, choose the word of the government, and you consign yourself to your fate. Apollo 18 isn't a movie I would recommend to everyone. It's dark and gritty and incredibly claustrophobic. But to write the film off as just another found footage movie or paranormal activity in space is to do it a massive disservice. Director Gonzalo Lopez Gallego came to the project last minute, and as a result his focus wasn't as much on the story, but on the visual language of the film. He wanted to make something unique and authentic, and it really shows. There are entire sequences in this film where I forget this is a soundstage. I'm supposed to be a filmmaker. Similar to Elariel Kayam's Larger Than Life, the stressed video quality helps sell the visual effects. And the look of this movie is just, they did this thing where they took some of the Super 16 mags and they just f***ed them up. I mean, royally f***ed them up. They threw sand on them, they kicked them, they called them names, they made them watch Bright on repeat, and as a result some of that film for the stock was knackered. It was in terrible state, and then they used those magazines in the film not knowing how the end result would look, and it's amazing. I would love to read the original script for this film, because to hear the director discuss the film in the commentary, this film looks nothing like its first incarnation. For one, the movie and the script started with Nate and Ben on the moon already. This is a perfect example of a film found in the edit. And although, yeah, there are some issues, I would love to have more of John's deleted material in there, and I think there are times where the constraint of the camera angles and the spacesuits, and the fact we don't get much face-to-face time, especially with the three astronauts together in the Freedom, it means you miss out on a lot of the personality, and they're all really good actors, so it's a shame we didn't get more of that. It would have been nice maybe to have that barbecue scene in full, so we can see more of what they're fighting for, what they're going for. But at the end of the day, within the budgetary and the time constraints, the technological constraints, and the fact that this flapping anus was involved, this is a really good movie. So no, I can't recommend everyone goes to watch this film, but if you like sci-fi, you like horror, you like space, you like all that juicy Super 16 aesthetic, then definitely give it a watch. You might find that it's a film you really enjoy. And remember, no matter what country you live in, they don't care about you and they'll step over your infected, burned carcass in the street so long as it helps line their pockets. Good night, everyone.